All right, I'd like to call this meeting to order. All rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God,
indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
This is the Gateway Board of School Directors Study Session Meeting, Tuesday, January the 11th. Hey, where's Bonnie? Oh, she's up there.
I'm here.
Very disconcerting, Bonnie. Can I have a roll call recording of those present, please?
Mr. Bova,
Here.
Mrs. Cerrucci,
Here.
Mrs. Delaney,
Here.
Mrs. McBride,
Here.
Ms. Mungo,
Here.
Mr. Ritter,
Here.
Dr. Singh,
Here.
Mrs. Warning,
Here.
and Mr. Williams.
Here. Thank you. So our first order of business is comments from residents on agenda items. Do we have no one who is called in advance to speak on agenda items. Anyone here who would like to? No? We do have a couple of people that wanted to speak on non-agenda items. So of course, we'll get to that at the end of our show. Okay. So let's move on now to, Jared Ewing. And I am not going to Zelenovsky.
Yes,
There we go. I nailed it.
At this point, Mr. Schott, are you with us?
Yes, I am, sir. I will take it.
You can take it from here.
Sure. Thank you. Again, this evening, we have Jared Ewing from Zelmkowski Axelrod to review the results of the 2020-2021 fiscal year local audit. In front of you this evening, you will have copies of both of those documents to be able to peruse. Same ones I believe I had emailed to the board, as well as posted on the district's website as well. And as we have on the screen, Mrs. Isha has put up Mr. Ewing's presentation of what he's going to be reviewing this evening. And with that, Mr. Ewing, the floor is yours, sir.
I believe you're muted.
Oh, you have to unmute, Jared.
There we go.
There we go.
Yes, Zelmkowski Axelrod is how it's pronounced. We usually go by ZA just because of the way it's spelled. And I know when I first started with ZA, I actually spelled it wrong for about 3 months on my personal signature on all my emails for a while. So, but I'm a principal with Zelmkowski Axelrod, and we perform the financial and single audit of the Gateway School District for this year. You should have two documents in front of 2 reports. One's a little bit thicker. That's the financial statement audit. We're going to start with that one. And what this does is this is our report on the financial statements taken as a whole for the school district. And if you look on pages 1 through 3, this is the unmodified opinion that we issued for the school district. And an unmodified opinion is the highest form of assurance that we can give on a financial statement. And basically that means we're not recording transactions in an unusual way, in a way that's not generally accepted within the auditing standards and accounting standards in the United States of America. Since you're a school district, we also have to follow government auditing standards. And had we had any issues with this, we might have had to modify our opinion, or worse yet, issue an adverse opinion, which we don't want to. An unmodified opinion is what you always want to shoot for when you're having an audit, and that's the highest form of assurance that we can give you. It also shows that we didn't have any audit findings that were significant that we would have to report that would impact that opinion, which is great. On pages 4 through 12 of the document is the management's discussion and analysis. And this is an overlook of the financial statements. It's prepared by management, Mr. Schott in particular. And what it does is it sort of goes through some narratives and explains some of the differences that occur between the numbers from last year to this year, maybe gives some insight into why a number may have jumped or why a number may have decreased during the year, and gives a little bit of insight as what's happening next with the school district and what the plans are for the future. Those are usually very well written, and especially this one. It helps to understand the financial statements as a whole, and I definitely recommend that you read that and study that as you go through the financial statements. The next part of the financial statements is what we call the basic financial statements. And your report consists of 5 parts. First is the government-wide financial statements on pages 13 and 14. And this would be our statement of net position and statement of activities. And what this does is this looks at the school district as a whole. We look at your governmental activities and your business type activities, and we combine those. This statement as part of a school district is also a full accrual statement, meaning we add your fixed assets, we account for your debt, we account for the pension liability, the other post-employment benefit liabilities, compensated absences, anything that would not necessarily been paid, but would have been recognized as an expense or revenue on the accrual basis. The next part starts on pages 15 through 21, and these are the fund financial statements. And these might be the statements that you're a little bit more familiar with. These will look at your general fund, your construction fund, your food service fund, and these are on a modified accrual basis. We don't include fixed assets on the government funds. We don't include debt. Any debt payments, those are expensed immediately in the fund type financial statements. This is normally where you see your budget for your general fund. So it's on that accounting basis for those. Pages 22 through 50 are the notes to the financial statements. And these pretty much haven't changed from what we had last year. However, I did want to point out on note 14, we did have a restatement this year. And usually that's cause for concern when you have a restatement and we might have to modify our opinion. But in this instance, we didn't, because this was required in accordance with Government Auditing Standards Bureau. It was a GASB pronouncement. And what this GASB did, GASB 84, is it took our fiduciary funds. Those that were with us last year, we had a separate set of fiduciary funds. This would be your scholarship funds and your student activity funds. And we had separate statements for those funds. Those are no longer allowed to be reported separately unless you meet certain conditions. The long and short of it is these are now reported as special revenue funds for the student activity funds, and your scholarship funds have actually been folded into your general fund. So what we have to do is we just have to restate the beginning net position and fund balance for those statements or for those funds because they are no longer reported as a separate fund in the financial statements. It does not hinder our opinion at all. It's required. Actually, every government agency would be doing the same thing this year. Also, I wanted to point out the risks and uncertainties disclosure on note 16. That's new this year also. If you were with us last year on the board, last year we had a COVID-19 specific note that was new because it happened after the audit had been performed. Well, since we're still dealing with COVID-19 and the effects of the pandemic, we're not sure how it's going to impact the school district. That note has sort of been changed and trimmed down, and it's now called risks and uncertainty disclosure. The required supplementary information on 51 and 57. This is where you'll see a comparison of your budget to actual for your general fund. And also some other schedules that are required as a result of the pension liability and other post-employment benefits liability. And then on pages 58 and 59, we did include the listing of the student activity fund, the different programs that we've always included. Excuse me. Although it's no longer a separate statement within the financial statements, we did break that information out for you. The next report, I'm going to move to the smaller one. This is our single audit report. And this is required based on the amount of federal awards and the federal expenditures that the school district has.
Hello, Jared, can you hear us?
We have a question.
Yeah,
Yes.
so just simple question that what do you call assets and what you call capital assets?
I'm sorry, what do I call assets? And
Assets and capital assets, what are they?
capital assets are usually items, this would be equipment, furniture, office equipment, your buildings, anything that you purchase that is going to last more than 1 year. Regular assets would be items such as cash, accounts receivable, grants receivable, maybe prepaid expenses, that type of thing. Your capital assets are more long-term serving assets.
Thank you.
Capital assets are what we actually would show depreciation expense on. So we would record it as a capital asset on the government-wide financial statements. And then as the years go by, we take a portion of that and recognize it as depreciation expense each year. So anything that's depreciated is going to be treated as a capital asset.
Thank you.
Okay. And there is actually a note in the financial statements. Let's see, note 6 on page 32. Sort of gives a little summary of what's included in that: the land improvements, building improvements, furniture and fixture. Okay.
Yeah.
I should also point out too, with the financial statements, we have the government-wide that's full accrual and the modified accrual. There are 2 reconciliation statements in there on pages 15 and pages 17. And that's how we reconcile the 2 statements together, just to make sure that it makes a little bit of sense. But you can actually see in there what we're adding and what we're subtracting to get to the various net position and change in that position. Okay.
Yes.
All right. Okay, back to the single audit. There's 2 reports within the single audit that we're required to report on within this document. The first is we were supposed to give a report on internal control, on financial reporting, and on compliance in accordance with government auditing standards. And this is where we take a look at the internal controls of the school district according to the government standards. A lot of times they're called yellow book audits. And what we do is we analyze the control, see if it's in place, and see if it's appropriate. And if we had any findings, significant deficiencies, or material weaknesses, we would report it to you in this letter. I'm really happy to say that we did not have any findings or any significant deficiencies that we had to report to you, which is excellent. The next report on pages 5 and 7 is a report on compliance for the major program and on compliance in accordance with uniform guidance and the schedule of expenditures of federal awards. Excuse me. And what we do here is we take all the federal awards that the school district expended during the year, we perform a risk assessment, and that tells us which program we have to focus on for the year. We take that program, and then there are specific compliance requirements and internal control requirements that we're required to test for the major program. And again, if we had any significant deficiencies or material weaknesses or any audit findings with regards to the major program, it will be reported in this letter. Again, I'm happy to say we did not have any findings to report. The next pages 8 and 9 is the schedule of expenditures of federal awards, sometimes called the CFA. And this lists all the federal awards that were expended during the year. There's some notes to the CFA on page 10. And then the schedule of findings and question costs on page 11. That title is a little bit misleading, I think. It makes it sound like we had findings and question costs, and it doesn't. It's basically just a summary of what the results of the audit were. Okay. And I believe it lists also too the audit programs that we looked at this year. And this year we tested the child nutrition cluster and the ESSER funds. Okay. Page 12 is our summary schedule of prior audit findings. If we had any prior audit findings in the prior year, we would be required to follow up with them. So that letter is blank this year. Just a couple other required communications that we're required to discuss with the audit. Just to let you know that we had no difficulties in performing the audit. We had no disagreements with management. Management representations are obtained prior to issuing the bound reports. And what we do is we send a letter to the business manager, just verifying that he provided us everything that we asked for, that he agrees with the adjustments, if any, that were made to the financial statements, and just basically getting some assurance that he agrees with the reports also before they're issued. Also, if we had any consultations with other accountants, we'd be required to discuss that with you. We had none, or we were aware of none. My contact information is at the bottom. If you ever have any questions after you have some time to peruse the financial statements, feel free to get in contact with me. I also included Megan's information, Megan Crucial's information on there also. She was our manager on the job, and she did a lot of the field work. It might have been on site for some of this also. So if you happen to stop in, you probably saw her there. But again, if you have any questions, feel free to give us a call, and I'd be happy to walk you through it in a little bit more detail. Gateway School District, our staff actually, Megan was new on the job this year. Our staff actually likes working on the audit because Mr. Schott is very organized. He's always very prompt when we have questions to get an answer for us. And actually, I do use some of his information for training materials on new accountants on other jobs, and we'll come to say, hey, how do we handle this on this audit? Usually I'll pull out Gateway's work papers and I'll say, here's how it's supposed to be done. So the finance department there has done a wonderful job. I just wanted to point that out. But if anyone has any further questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Call your number one.
Yeah.
Thank
Thanks for a
you.
great job, Mr. Schott.
Any other questions? Nope. All right, thank you, sir.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. Thank you, Jared.
Someone clapping. That's someone's clapping. No. We're gonna move on to section B, bills and financial reports.
Mr. Schott?
Thank you, Mr. Bova. This evening, you have section B. Financial reports comprised specifically of section B1 list of bills for the month of January 2022, section B2 monthly financial statements for November 2021, and section B3 our first set of budget transfers for January 2022, and also our first set of transfers for the 21-22 fiscal year. We present these items this evening for the board's review.
Questions, comments, or?
Anyone, questions, comments on section B?
So where is this information? I have this page, it says section B, and so there should be something with it, right?
That is, yeah, that was in your packet. that
Yeah.
You just learned about today.
Oh.
That was- I'll take all the responsibility for that. You
No,
should
no,
have been
no
made
problem,
aware
no
of how to
problem,
get
no
to
problem.
that.
No, yeah,
So you will have all that financial information.
yeah, I don't.
Yes, okay.
Sorry, pardon me.
Yep.
It's all electronic, so we try to save money on paper.
Anything else for Mr. Schott? Nope. Let's move on to section C, that we have nothing previously tabled. Nope. Move on to section D, personnel matters.
Mrs. Crump, personnel.
Thank you, Mr. Thank you. For this evening, we have, excuse me, 4 items listed under resignations. We're presenting 3. Leave of absence, we have 4. For our new board members, just to let them know, we use the employee's ID number and not the names to protect with the HIPAA laws. Under section 3 for transfers, we have 3 transfers as per the collective bargaining agreement for Teamsters. Under section 4 for employment, we have 3 names listed for a paraprofessional, substitute custodian, and a full-time custodian. For next week's meeting, we will have additional names to add. We have a student worker we're recommending, athletic event workers, and we also have supplemental contracts at this time. Again, we'll have more of those added for next week.
Any questions for Mrs. Crump?
Mrs. Crump, yes.
Yes,
Why
ma'am.
are we, what are we doing with the student worker?
He is assisting with Mr. Holtze for like the extra events. So the event that we had in January, concert events, they need additional workers. And so that's what the student workers are being used for.
Okay, thank you.
Could be anything from stage, lighting, camera operations, et cetera.
Right. The last event required Mr. Holtze and 3 stage workers.
Anything else for Mrs. Crump? Nope. Thank you, Mrs. Crump.
Thank you.
Move on to conferences.
Section E, conferences, Dr. Chaky.
Thank you, Dr. Short. For discussion tonight, we do have 2 conferences listed for the Penn State MAC Admins 2022 conference.
Very good. Thank you. Any questions for Dr. Rossi? What was that?
Dr. Chaky.
Oh, I'm sorry. I saw your
Yeah.
lips were moving. I saw that. The mask threw me off. I'm sorry, Dr. Shaky or Dr. Rossi, any of our doctors. Pick a doctor,
Dr.
give him a
Singh.
question. Dr. Singh, none. Thank you, sir. Let's move on to section F, administrative resolutions.
We have the Section F Administrative Report. We have action items. This is elementary education. Dr. Rossi.
Thank you, Dr. Short. We have two action items on the agenda this evening. Number one, approve the purchase of Lexia Learning product to supplement the middle school after-school tutoring program. And item number two is approve additional tutoring hours and varsity tutors for the after-school. middle school.
So moved. Has been moved and seconded.
Can you
Do
tell
we
me
have
who seconded that motion?
I didn't hear that.
I didn't hear that.
Mr. Williams. Mr. Williams
Mr.
made the
Williams.
motion. Mrs. Sarushi seconded. Can
Mrs. Rucci, a second.
Thank you.
you tell us a little bit about varsity tutors?
For varsity tutors, we've been using varsity tutors at the high school for some of the Keystone courses. We do have some extra hours over that we're going to use, but not quite enough to secure the 6 weeks that we have for the Moss side. So essentially, varsity tutors is a live tutoring. virtual.
The ability for a student to log in and actually receive live tutoring instruction from a certified educator through varsity tutors.
But it's not face to face. It's
It's
live, but it's on like
Yeah,
a Zoom
correct,
type of
correct, yes.
platform or something.
But it is live in the sense that
Yep.
they'll have some,
They can ask
we'll have
questions.
our work available to them, and they'll be able to interact with kids, we'll have a proctor.
Again, we're trying multiple ways to reach students, some of which may not have the ability to stay after school. So if they are at home, we're able to get them access to tutoring while they're at home online for whatever issues they may have.
Have we looked at using high school students as tutors for other students?
We've looked at that. We've had that in the past.
We have talked about that, we
Yeah.
talked to, Dr. Chicken, I've talked to.
Mr. Whelan, National Honor Society.
It was just getting the kids.
Yeah.
The kids to come down and work that logistics. But that is a possibility.
Yeah, it's been difficult with COVID and getting kids there. I mean, it's been a tough process. And that's why we've kind of expanded our search with middle school, because we were having some issues trying to get students access to tutoring. So, we kind of like broadened our search and wanted to move into more of a remote access for kids.
So could you give us any sense of like what amount of kids actually utilize tutoring? I mean, do we have a bunch of kids who are trying to get tutoring and can't, or?
The principal have identified 50 students for targeted English language arts and 50 for math. So we're targeting around 100 students.
Is that just high school or is that?
That's middle school.
Has tutoring been offered to our teachers as an extra service?
Yes.
Yes.
We do have a handful.
Who have signed up. Others just simply don't have the availability or opportunity to do so. So, one of the buildings that we were having difficulties with was Mosside Middle. So that's whenever we kind of expanded our search.
Are you able to open that up to all the district teachers, or does it have to be a Mosside Middle School teacher to tutor in Mosside Middle
We
School?
offer it to everybody, but the schedules are so different. For
Yeah.
instance, the elementary doesn't end until approximately 4 o'clock, so
Right.
tutoring's almost over.
Yeah.
But we do actually have a high school teacher coming down
Mhm.
after their day. So this will start around 3:15, which is perfect.
And again, we do offer transportation. It's just, sometimes a student's schedule and they have to be at home and they're not available to meet afterwards. So, we're trying to bridge that gap between both in person and the opportunity to be
There's
at home.
student transportation offered.
Yeah, we do have buses. Yep.
Oh,
Mhm.
great.
Is the cost of this per student?
For which one?
For the
Varsity or-
varsity.
It's per session. So, yeah, so depending on how many sessions we have, that's what we get charged.
So you can have more than one student in that
We're gonna
session,
have-
right?
We're gonna have 3 to 5 in a group, a small group with the teacher or proctor.
Okay.
as well.
How many? So 4 to 5%.
Yeah.
Okay.
The term varsity tutors, that has nothing to do with sports.
No, it's the name of a company, a business.
Oh, okay.
Yes, an outside entity.
Oh, okay.
Mhm.
And we used to have peer tutoring.
We used to, yes, offer through National Honor Society. since COVID and everything happening there, is it's difficult to get that child into a setting.
Because I know in other districts, well, in the city, we were very successful with the peer tutoring.
Yeah. We had a strong peer tutoring group prior to COVID. So it's always something, and Mr. Whelan expressed interest in resuming that again. We're hopeful to do it this year, but again, we're right back where we were.
Any more questions? Nope. Yes, can we have a vote, Bonnie?
Yes. Mrs. Cerucci,
Aye.
Mrs. Delaney,
Aye.
Mrs. McBride,
Aye.
Ms. Mungo,
Aye.
Mr. Ritter,
Aye.
Dr. Singh,
Aye.
Mrs. Warning,
Aye.
Mr. Williams,
Aye.
and Mr. Boba.
Aye.
Motion carries.
Go, thank you.
Continue on.
Let's continue on to,
Section F is still open for items for discussion that Dr. Rossi will take for elementary education.
gotcha.
Thank you, Dr. Surigan. Item number 1 is approve the following items that were placed on display at the November 16th, 2021 regular board meeting. That's policy 918, Title 1 Parent and Family Engagement and Super Kids Reading Program. Item number 2 is to approve the Professional Education Committee, Steering Committee, which essentially is a subcommittee for the Pennsylvania Department of Education Comprehensive Plan. Item number 3 is approve the purchase of the Hindu reading materials pending the final 22-23.
Item number 4, approve the 30-day display for the high school English language arts resources as listed, starting with Honors 9, Honors 10, Honors 11, and Honors 12. Item number 5, new policies, final approval, that were placed on public display beginning December 7, 2021, as listed there. And item number 6, 2 facility agreements, Gateway Midget Football and Cheerleading.
Mr. Schott?
Item number 7, this is our annual approval of the general fund budget tax rates not to exceed the index for the 22-23 fiscal year. I will not read this entire resolution, but just as a nutshell, and particularly for our new board members, this resolution enables us to basically state that if there is or would be any type of tax increase, it would not exceed 4.1% of the current millage rate of the district. And what it essentially does is enables us to maintain what I consider to be the old budgetary timeline and not have to prepare a preliminary budget at this particular point in the fiscal year, particularly when we have not even heard Governor Wolf's state budget as of yet for the upcoming year. But again, this is a typical resolution. We've done this many times, and that's essentially what it does for our upcoming 22-23 general fund budget. Item number 8 is our annual approval of advertisement for bids for the general fund for various school supplies for the upcoming 22-23 fiscal year, and their supplies depicted below. Item number 9 is the acceptance of federal IDEA Part B pass-through funds, acceptance of federal IDEA ARP supplemental pass-through funds, and approval of the preliminary IDEA budget through the Allegheny Intermediate Unit number 3 for the current 21-22 fiscal year. That grand total amount is indicated is $982,439.69. And that preliminary budget is depicted in Exhibit E. Item number 10, acceptance of district donations received for the current 21-22 fiscal year. We have 3. The first category, we have Core Church holiday gifts, Danielle Cole holiday gifts, Jaden's Restaurant holiday gifts, initiated through Jennifer Hoffner for the holiday gifts distributed to needy students at University Park Elementary School. Item number B, we have Jack Buncher Foundation through the Greater Pittsburgh Community Food Bank, a $500 check, also the Jennifer Hoffner Backpack Program. And the third item is BNY Mellon Community Partnership, $750 check through Jody Price, an employee of BNY Mellon. That's support of student activities at Ramsey Elementary School. Item number 11, we have approved the change order for Musco Sports Lighting in the total net amount of $48,957.50 as depicted below. And that specifically is related to an increase in depth of the light pole foundations required for the athletic fields. by the high school. And finally, item number 12, approval Tri-Cog Land Bank's notice of proposed property disposition for one Monroeville property located within the Gateway School District, and that is depicted in Exhibit F.
Thank you, Mr. Schott.
Welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Schott. So we've got 12 items there. Do we have any questions or thoughts on any or all of those?
Mr. Schott, if you have handy, what is the total that we have paid to Tri-Cog?
I have that handy.
Thank you.
Give me 1 second. Actually, to date, we have paid $77,077.34. And then actually just in the last couple of weeks, I've calculated, but we have not been billed the amount for the 2022 calendar year. So I expect probably in the next month or so to be billed that amount and to pay that amount. So the grand total, once the district pays the additional amount, we would have a total of $90,601.35 total paid back to the Tri-Cog Land Bank. And how that's calculated, again, for some of our new board members, it is a 5% calculation of the face amount of prior year delinquent real estate tax collections. That's what each of the members of the Tri-Cog Land Bank pays, whether they're a school district member or a municipality member.
So that 90,000 is over what period of time, Mr. Schott?
Oh, I believe, I want to say that's 5 or 6 years.
Okay.
And then once this property is on the tax rolls, how long will we get tax revenue from them?
Well, it's depends on, once they acquire the properties, they get them free and clear of any liens, et cetera, against those. And then they're able to market those and get them back, similar to the one property that is on the agenda for this evening for the disposition, as in terms of trying to sell that. But yeah, once that property comes back online to a individual family, et cetera, who would be buying that, then sure, they would be getting the revenue, not only the district, but also the municipality and the county would also be sharing in that additional real estate tax revenue.
So like forever, as long as the property exists,
Sure. Oh, sure.
20, 30, 40, 50 plus years.
Yes.
Okay. It's a land bank.
This is part of what the Turtle Creek Council of Governments. So one of the things they do is a land bank amongst a number of entities, both school districts and municipalities throughout the valley.
What we do is we get
blights.
properties that are blighted and we get them back on the tax rolls. Well, the land bank does, and we're a partner in doing that.
Have we made more than we paid?
Not yet.
No,
It's
no.
a,
So
it's a long presentation that we could do for our new board members. We should probably do that.
we can do that, and I won't take 10 seconds to editorialize, though. Ms. Morning points out that, yeah, we've spent, close to $90,000 over the course of, is it 6 years?
It's about 6 years now.
So that's, 15,000 a year. And I would equate this myself with education itself. We invest in education. We don't get the return this week, this month, next year.
That was gonna be my next question. It's a long-term investment
It is
in the outcome.
Yeah, essentially a pot of money goes to purchasing blighted property in the area. Properties can be torn down, lots can be sold, houses can be built. Essentially, tax records are clean at that point in time. Then the idea is to sell those properties to get the taxable income back into the pockets of the school district.
So this is a long-term goal.
It is, not only is it long-term, if you followed the city of Pittsburgh, their land bank has been in existence longer than this one, and I think they've had one property that they've gotten done. Turtle Creek is way ahead of that pace. They've got a couple that they've actually done. They've gotten a number under control. But we will have them come in and do a presentation. Y'all can decide for yourself about the viability, because this is something we vote on as to whether or not we want to participate.
So we are saying we have, even though it's a long-term investment, we have gotten some return.
No.
I didn't remember.
No, not yet.
No,
Not as yet.
Okay.
yeah.
Mr.
It's
Schott, do you
it's
know how
kind of
many
a-
properties in Pitcairn and Monroeville they actually either have or are getting? Do you
No,
have available?
I don't have the statistic. I know that there was, I want to say maybe a month or two ago, they provide us with a summary that I believe depicted that. But for instance, this property going back out, and then we actually just received an email from them today that they're considering 2 more properties in Monroeville to acquire as well. So they're definitely on the move, and we're definitely seeing the acquisitions occurring here within the school district's boundaries. But I would think if we would have them come in, they would have all the updated information, be able to share that information during a presentation.
Absolutely. And all entities of government had to be in order for this to work, meaning Monroeville Council. Yeah.
My
Pitcairn.
concern is, it's just not Monroeville, Pitcairn. It's other school districts. It's
That is
East
correct,
Allegheny, it's Woodland Hills.
Right.
It's others that are all put the money into the pot. So they could be purchasing properties in Swissvale and using the money that Gateway is putting in to purchase these properties, where Gateway is not getting anything back in return. So that's why I always vote against this, because I have been following this since it started, and we are putting money in and we're not seeing any money being recouped.
Can we
Yeah.
ask them how many properties they purchased for other school districts? And
Oh, yeah, that's-
They
maybe
tell
this-
us every
they
property
tell
that
you
they're
everything.
involved in.
And I'd have to say we've had at least 3 to 5 since we've done this.
I was
I would
gonna say
guess.
there's at least 2 in Pitcairn and 3 or 4 in Monroeville. So I would not
Yeah.
say that number's wrong.
See, my concern is too also, seeing the properties that they purchase. We've had them come in and do presentations. When we questioned, who is doing the updates, who's doing the maintenance on it, it was very hard for them to say who they are, that it's coming out to being friends of the families who's doing this. And so this is what concerns me.
No,
So
I don't want to,
I know.
I was at their meeting.
I know you were.
Just last month, and they will have no trouble telling you exactly who's got the properties, and their focus is
Correct.
now trying to get the properties into homeowners. They actually have built-in provisions to try to prevent flipping, so, right, but the point
Which
is,
is why it's-
we'll get a presentation together.
And it's important that we have one of our board positions is a person to represent us at these land bank meetings.
Yes.
So if we're concerned about making sure our district is included in these properties, it's important that we have somebody from our school board who actually goes to the meetings and is involved.
Mrs.
I
Cerrucci and
know,
was
that's
awake
why
the
I'm
whole
very
time.
thankful that you went.
They did have a dinner, just to be honest, so that might have been part of it.
And I'll work with Mrs. Warren to get the parties to the table. Typically, we do almost like an intergovernmental where we invite Monroeville, Pitcairn, the school board. That way we have all parties at the table in case there's any question, because we do know that there's turnover on council, Monroeville, Pitcairn as well.
Can I make one more comment and then I'll stop? When you're looking at the land bank, you're not just looking at it as a financial investment. You're looking at the value that sometimes you can't measure on the dollar of taking blighted properties away from your community. Things like lowering property values, or, using those places for drug houses, or things that, are undesirable for our community, but you might not be able to put a monetary number to that. So that's another avenue, an aspect to think about when we're looking at the land bank, and we can talk more about it when we have the meeting.
So we will set that up post haste. Questions on any of these other items?
I was just gonna say one other thing when you were discussing land bank. I guess when we heard the presentation before, I guess I looked at it as being similar to what I would consider a flip and all. That's why I guess I was thinking that it wasn't going to, it was going to be long-term, but flips, in order to make your money back, you have to work within a time frame. And that was always my concern.
Right, so when I say flip, I mean, they were trying to make sure the properties didn't get into the hands of speculators, for example, who would grab a property cheaply because it was part of the land bank and get it into the hands of a landlord. And this, I'm not disparaging all landlords, in case anyone's listening, but occasionally landlords might do something with a property that's more in their best interest than the community's best interest. So the land bank makes a concerted effort to actually get the property in the hands of someone who has shown an interest and ability to actually be a presence in the community. And that does take a little longer.
Yeah.
Yeah, then a flip, yeah. Okay.
Anything else? Do I hear a motion? Scotty, come on, help me out.
Discussion only.
Discussion.
These are discussion only.
Oh, I thought we were approving, final approval. Okay, then let's move on. What else we got?
I believe that is it.
That's it. Ready for some comments from residents on non-agenda items. We've got Mr. Ray Firth.
I'm handing out to you material similar to what Dr. Short had the other evening on the achievement gap. Just to speak about. And what I've handed you is website is future ready, same website, same format that Dr. Short showed. And what I pulled for you is the high school for 21-22 and the middle school for 21-22. As I start, I'd like you to think to yourself what you would consider to be an acceptable achievement gap in.
So people at home.
Yes, I'm with you. Thank you. Thank you. So this is the material on both the proficiency level and the growth data by subgroups for the 3 subject areas that Dr. Short presented on last week. This is the follow-up to that. I'd like you to think to yourself, what achievement gap level would you consider to be acceptable for the Gateway School District? The level to which students who are Black, proficiency level as a group is lower percentage-wise than the proficiency level for students who are white. And think forward 9 years to what you think that gap ought to be at that point in time. Mr. Thomas in his letter suggested to you that there should be no achievement gap and that all children, Black and white, should cross the finish line and collect their diploma at the same level of proficiency. The question to you is, would you agree with that, or would you consider it acceptable if the achievement gap was brought down to 10% or 15%, or the current level of 25%? Or do you not see it as a responsibility of the board to expect elimination of an achievement gap by 2030? And referring to the handout on the first page, this is the proficiency data. The first block is for English language arts and literature. And on the right-hand side, Black students, 64% of the Black students tested proficient, and the white students, 88% tested proficient. And that's a gap of 24%. In the math and algebra, Black students were proficient as a group at 44%, white students at 80%. In science and biology, proficiency level for Black students as a group was 58%, and for white students, 85%. That's a gap of 27%. If you average the 3, English 24% gap, math 36% gap, science 27, the average is 26%. So the average gap across the subject areas for 11th grade students, 21-22, is 26%. At the middle school, the gap on the average is approximately the same, and those are pages 3 and 4. I won't go through each of them, but the gap in English is 19%, math 30%, and science 26%, an average of 25%. My comment to you is that now is the time to use the current data that the superintendent has provided you. It was asked for last time when there was debate, to direct the superintendent to prepare for the board a plan with specific actions and the necessary budget with the goal of eliminating the achievement gap by 2030. That is, that in 2030, Black children and white children would cross the finish line together, following up on Mr. Thomas's framing, at graduation and receive their diplomas. You and the superintendent would know There is no gap in their proficiency level.
You have 30 seconds.
For that plan, by the time that you begin to review the budget for school year 22-23, so that it can be incorporated in the budgeting process. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Firth.
So,
Thank you, Mr. Firth.
Yes.
so before you leave, so how do you get your proficiency calculation?
Calculation?
Yeah, how do you reach that number for proficiency?
I
Black is
apologize, my
64%.
computer died before coming in.
Yeah,
The difference between the proficiency level of white students and the proficiency level of black students.
yeah, but what is proficiency level?
As he presented, it's the testing depending on the grade level. But in this case, it's the testing that students take once a year. On the growth measures, and the tests they take, different grade levels get different state testing for this.
So.
And then the next section is the growth data.
So back to proficiency. So you have, last time there was some discussion about how this proficiency number is reached. And there were 4 levels of proficiency, and first 2 were pooled,
Yes, I'm sorry.
and lower 2 were pooled.
Yes.
So first 2 were pooled. In your case also, this is the first 2 pooled?
Proficient, on the left-hand side, it shows you. On the left-hand side, it's proficient and advanced, or advanced for the student. It's the sum of those two. So where I said proficiency level, in this case, they're reporting the sum of the students who are test proficient and those who are tested at an advanced level, the sum of the two. And on that, on a later, well, I've given you the website here. It's really a wonderful website. And the school has a nice link for it on their website. I had to call to figure out how to find it, but it really is, this will answer if you're concerned around elementary students, a particular school. It's quite readable once you get it. What I've given here is they also have a way that you can print it. And what I've got here are the first 2 of 4 pages, because you can easily create either through Excel or a PDF and get proficiency, growth, measures on career advancement, graduation rates. And the growth system that Dr. Short addressed, I think is excellent. And it's a really interesting way that material on the right, the circles and the arrows are also very helpful. My 3 minutes, we couldn't get through it all, but it's what Dr. Short was emphasizing in terms of being able to see where either an individual student is or as a group where they're going. So you can see on the very top up here is the table for how to read the progress towards the goals. And you can look at it both to look at it for the individual child's target as well as for the broader state goals. Did I say that right?
The least I can say is that the differences are dramatic.
I believe so, yes.
Yes, so, and I think since you have the access to so many things, maybe you should see what result you get if you do not pool the proficients and advanced. If you do not pool, how do you get how the numbers look?
If you don't do which,
If don't pool.
Combine proficient and advanced.
If you don't pool.
Oh, proficient and advanced?
Yes, and see how numbers looks.
I believe that data is tucked in it. Well, what you can see on another table is the breakout for students in the advanced who test in the advanced level. You can see that breakout in terms of what percent of the advanced population are students who are Black and students who are white.
So if I'm looking at this correctly, and correct me if I'm wrong, if we look at the first one, the percentage proficiency and advanced is 82.1%. And our white students are at 88.4%, higher than that, the average. And our Black students are just above the statewide average. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, so as you look further down, it appears that our Black students are just that statewide average, but our white students are meeting or above the average for the proficiency or advanced.
That's true. When you look at that statewide average, if you look into this, one, go to the beginning of the material, it will explain
The
how
grade,
the state has.
grade levels that are attached to that average.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And well, you get grade levels
Mhm.
mixed in on the average, but it'll tell you how the state has set the. One, remember the scores that Dr. Short pointed out are our neighboring districts. Pennsylvania's school system is terrible on performance. They're in court for it now, for a number of reasons. So when you talk statewide average, we're not talking gateway schools statewide by any means. Consider what he showed you for Stowe Rocks and McKeesport. And it gets worse when you get into the rural areas because the underfunding is significant. So the statewide average, I'd be cautious about it. And I think my bias is we have to think about our district. Our district has less poverty than McKeesport. McKeesport has 10 times the level of lead poisoning we have.
You've made an excellent point, and you've left us with a.
I apologize. No, I just.
No, you've left us with an interesting thought about your goal for 2030. And I appreciate your effort and your time. And
Well, I
obviously.
appreciate your effort talking with the
No,
superintendent.
I
about
appreciate
a
you
plan.
more. You're not going to win this battle. Thank you, Mr. Firth.
Thank
Next,
you.
we
Thank you,
have
Mr. Firth.
Bob Elms, who would like to talk about the achievement gap.
Can I make one quick comment on Mr. First's
Absolutely.
presentation? When you were looking at the example one that we were just talking about, I just want to point out, if you look at economically disadvantaged, it is 69.8%. And I think it's fair to say that there are many people that realize that there is a correlation between socioeconomic status and school performance that we also cannot ignore.
Absolutely.
I believe Mr.
Driving
Thomas
force.
pointed that out in his letter too. It's one of the 4 factors that go into this gap.
Right.
So it's ignoring it seems to be disingenuous. Yes.
Groups overlap, need to talk about short, many of those students overlap, how that's broken out.
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
Mr. Elms.
Once again, Mr. Firth, thank you very much for all this wonderful information.
There was when Dr. Short presented all this, there was a tremendous amount of data and a lot of it was gone through quite fast for us. I'd like to expand on some of it. And I'm going to use the same data that Mr. Firth had. And first, I'd like to point out that on the data for the Mosside Middle School, the Gateway Middle School, all the test data is below the statewide average, which is not good. The Gateway High School happens to be one of the best schools in the school district, and Dr. Short can take a lot of credit for that. I was on the school board in 2012, and we had some discussions about the achievement gap at that time, in particular in math, and reading. Dr. Short instituted a reading lab, a math lab, and he also put in some courses for remedial at the high school. Dr. Short was principal at the high school. And I think those have made a tremendous difference. I looked at the 2012 data. The Gateway High School was the worst of our schools then. It was ready to be taken over by the state if things didn't change. And now the Gateway High School is one of the best. There's a lot to be learned from that. And the lessons to be learned are you can make a change, but the change has to be something that involves the teachers and the students, additional training for those who don't. Now, let me let me give you a little bit of the numbers. For 2012, the achievement gaps basically haven't changed much. For the Gateway High School, for reading, which is now called ELA, it was a 34% achievement gap between white and black. For math, it was 24%. There's a couple things you have to remember. Don't take the numbers from 2012 and compare them to 2018. Testing was different. When you go to math, the curriculum is different too, which a lot of us would say the curriculum has improved. But I do some tutoring and the parents will tell you they don't understand the curriculum. So, but it's much better for the students. The other thing is the Gateway Middle School, ELA was, or reading was 20% gap and math was 30%. That's a difference from where it is now. And the Gateway Middle School in reading was actually one of the better schools in the district at that time. And my daughter was at the Gateway Middle School. And I will tell you, we had some very good teachers there, very good teachers. Teaching is important. I mean, just so the skill of the teachers, which is part of their training, is important. You know, I think Mr. Firth has covered everything. The process has got delayed at the school board. The previous school boards had a tremendous amount of discussions about achievement gap and very little performance on doing anything about them. I'm very hopeful with this new school board that you will take the matter into your hands and put some funding where people's mouth used to be.
Thank you, Bob. Thank you, Mr. Ohms. Well,
Question.
yes, ma'am.
What we just approved tonight with the varsity tutors and all this, isn't this trying to bridge it and to bring people up to?
Yes. One of the issues that we've recognized that we're all facing is, you know, of course, coming out of, and I've been saying coming out of a pandemic for 3 years now, 3 school years, when you think about it. We recognize that whenever kids have been at home in isolation on a laptop, it's not the same. You need that interaction. You need to be face-to-face, eyeball-to-eyeball instruction. You know, one could say, and I understand the mask, but you have to be able to read faces. You have to be able to understand what a child is saying. Kids have to be able to hear. And all of those things have factored into where we're at, just not here at Gateway, but throughout our country, within the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. And we're playing this catch-up game. And one of the things that we're trying to do is to advance or provide more resources to our kids, such as this tutoring, to get them where we feel they need to be, both academically and socially. And we have a long ways to go. And I'm just not saying that for Gateway, but I think every superintendent in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania recognizes what we're faced with. And we're seeing school systems across the nation shut down due to this variant. And whenever you shut down, again, those periods of time whenever students are not in the classroom, significant. And we're going to be at this for a long time. And we recognize that, you know, we have to up the game with whatever we can do with resources. Time, you know, I shared with Mr. Elms years ago, a book about targeted instructional time that, you know, essentially either doubled or tripled the amount of time a student had based on the deficit the student came into the classroom with. It's pretty powerful if you think about it. You know, the traditional 42-minute instructional time for one period of math, well, that does one thing, but if a child's 2 or 3 years behind in math, how is that child going to catch up to where he should be or where she should be? You have to provide extra time and support and resources to do it. And that's one of the things we've been effective at in doing over the years. And we're going to be faced with this challenge for the next several years. And I'm being very honest with everyone, for the next several years.
We need to have all hands on deck. We need to
Absolutely.
get everyone together, get all the resources that we need to assist all of the students. And in the meantime, working towards reducing this gap.
Correct.
I would like to offer that this room's full of people of a certain vintage. And when we get to a certain vintage, our energy starts to not expand quite as rapidly as it once did. Occasionally, I think we waste some amount of energy. It seems we're battling about the existence of an achievement gap. We've had two different presentations essentially looking at the same data. No one up here, maybe who's ever sat up here, would say, boy, we got this achievement gap whipped. Mr. Firth, you've produced an actual goal, and maybe that was a step that hadn't been taken. Maybe a zero achievement gap seemed pie in the sky. Maybe we need to say that out loud, that that's where we're headed for. But I think we need to quit wasting time and energy kind of debating whether there is or isn't a gap or how significant it might be. We know there is one. No matter what data you look at, no matter how you look at it, there's a gap. Whether
Every school in the Commonwealth can identify the
that's
gap.
true, and maybe in the nation, but we work in this one, and we would like to, when we're done with our tenures, whether it's 2 or 4 or 6 or 10 years, think we've advanced. So what we need to start talking about are the actual tools to do that, the actual procedures. You've mentioned some things Dr. Short did back in his illustrious principal career. So I think we need to make the next step. We're all on the same page. We've got a gap. The district benefits when that gap shrinks, the students benefit, the area benefits. We all want to see that happen. So let's make our conversations going forward. How are we going to do that? We have an equities department. I talked to Dr. Shaky this week. Are there any things we could be giving you? Are there any other resources to continue to advance what we've done? Maybe we should talk about that for a couple of minutes instead of simply, we need, for example, a full-time equities director. I don't have a problem with that as one of the parts of the solution, but while I've been listening to this debate, that seems to be the answer to the problem. Well, okay, that might be part of it, but we really need to be talking about some other things. So I'm sorry, that's, ma'am, you would like to speak.
Hi, my name's Judy.
Can I ask
Murray.
what you're crocheting?
I'm sorry.
Can I ask what you're crocheting? It looked like a wonderful piece there.
Well, if you would like a hat, put it in order.
Well,
it's
I can always
yours.
use, we could certainly use a hat. I would say
Go
that.
ahead.
I sat on this board for a number of years. I was on the board when you were hired.
Mhm.
Um,
Have her name, please.
Judy Murray.
Yep.
I'm a
Thank
retired school teacher. I have taught in a class of 25 children. I have taught in a class of 15 children with full-time aid. The difference in the achievement of those children is vast. So one very simple thing you can do is put your money where your mouths are and hire more teachers so that you have smaller classes. Simple.
And if I would pull up on the screen, the average class sizes right now
We've done
in,
this.
in elementary and even across the board. And I know Dr. Rossi is right here. He can expand upon that, but I think what you would see is pretty good. And when I say pretty good, less than 20 kindergarten, first and second.
18.
Yeah, obviously all depends on the.
Yeah,
building,
the
but-
certain buildings and
Did the microphones not work? I haven't covered it.
They work for
Yeah,
TV. They're
for TV.
Yours works, so.
But we agree wholeheartedly with you, and that is something that we've utilized the funding that's come from the federal government and state government to add additional staff. Also, it's very instrumental in class size reduction as well. And it's one thing that, trust me, we pride ourselves on where we're at with class sizes. And I don't know if you'll find another district with the class sizes that we have currently.
That is music to,
Yep.
that's music to my ears.
Mhm.
On a lighter note,
Yes.
Do you think you could put a few signs out there directing people to this room?
Yes,
See that
ma'am.
gentleman right behind you? Remember what I said about the, gets the second most complaints in the school district? That's director. of-
30 years ago, I asked for more signs.
Yeah, yeah,
Well, thank you, ma'am.
Thank you.
yes.
That would take money away from the tutoring budget.
Something
Mrs.
to,
Delaney?
yeah. Listening to the various presentations from our resident, one of the things that I'm hearing and I'm looking when you're saying maybe 2030, 8-year plan. So what can we be doing, like you said, Mr. Bova, to actually have some timeframes to get to see that growth a little bit more, to get to where we're eliminating?
Mhm.
Who sets up that strategic plan?
We have,
Get us
and
there.
with all due respect to Mr. Firth, we plan, and that was part of the whole presentation that we provided to everyone. It is our instructional plan on how we go about educating each and every child that comes into our district. There are so many different moving pieces, and I think we're all able to comprehend this. And I touched on it briefly, that a child may move into this district in 7th, 8th, or 9th grade. White, black, Asian, Indian, it doesn't make a difference. However, that child is coming with whatever educational background they have had from maybe 1 school, 2 schools, 3 schools, 4 schools, districts that they were prior in. They come into Gateway and we are accountable from day one for their test score. And understand that if you have 150 to 200 kids moving in a transient school district per year, multiple grade levels coming into the district, then the following year they're moving out and another 200 are moving in. Do you see how difficult that process is to manage? And I understand we all want that achievement gap to be high and equal.
No, you want the achievement high and equal. not the
Yes,
gap.
yes. You know what I'm saying.
I do. I
Thank
just
you.
wanna-
But when I say it's complex, extremely complex to manage and understand the mobility of children and families today. Whenever you're trying to come up with this goal of, okay, we want every child 100% proficiency, no matter what race, socioeconomic background, et cetera. We want it. We plan for it. But again, we're dealing every day with these types of mobility and tracking a kid with attendance, test scores that they're bringing into us, analyzing where they're at educationally. A kid may be coming in from, we'll say, East Allegheny. The parents come in and say, look, my kid's an honor roll kid. I want this kid in all honors. We know right away that East Allegheny honors is not Gateway honors courses. We put that kid in those classes, and guess what? In another 9 weeks, we pull them out. Complexities that the typical civilian, and I don't mean that in a negative way, unless you're in the system and you're dealing with it every day, it's difficult to comprehend. I understand what you're saying. We want this goal, just like the state says by 2030, you got to reach this national average or statewide average. You see that most of our scores, even in the elementary, few outliers that we had talked about with middle school, especially math, are not at that state average, but most are above it by 20 or 30 points. That is why we do what we do. And there's a system in place, and I've talked about it, and I've shared it with Bob over the years. When a kid comes into our system, we're gauging where they're at, just like whenever I go to the doctor's office. First thing they do, take your weight, blood pressure, how you feeling? They're assessing the individual. At that point, the doctor reads that information, says, you know what, Mr. Short, Dr. Short, you're under a lot of stress, aren't you? Blood pressure's high, off the charts, hard to believe. You need to do this over the next 9 weeks and come back and see me. It's what we do with children. When we assess a kid and they're behind a year, 2 or 3 years when they come into our system, we have to make up for those inadequacies that they have had in other districts.
So
But you know
what percentage of those kids that are coming into the district are below the state average? Do you know?
I could run that data, but over the last couple of years, we've had a significant number of students come in that have tested basic or below basic.
Am I correct that this is just based off testing scores, right? The PSSA.
The SSA and or the Keystone exam.
So in reality, we could have eliminated their daily achievement gap that doesn't reflect in a testing atmosphere.
Yeah, I see what she's saying.
Like
Yeah.
daily in life, in real
Yes,
life,
yes.
on a day-to-day basis.
I understand what you're saying. Yes,
That doesn't reflect,
correct.
because if we got a 7th grader on a 5th grade math level
Mhm.
and brought that student up to a 6th grade math level, but they're still getting a 7th grade test, technically their gap,
Yes. And that's the growth model.
but you can't measure that on.
Quantify that, really.
We can, the state measures it and quantifies it, okay? And they can do it by individual child and by a school building, which what you have seen in these reports. Predominantly, and I think these gentlemen can agree with me here that the growth is pretty significant here in the district. You have some pockets, some outliers, just like any other school that you would pull up. But for the most part, you're seeing high growth in the schools here at Gateway, meaning we're moving a child. And that's what I call the great equalizer. That takes away, where a child may have been educated from coming into the district. We get them, PVOS puts a score on them, and we either meet that score, they score higher, or score below.
I think what she's saying, if I'm right, is that these are a snapshot of one moment in time.
One moment at a time.
One
Remember how I
week
used that
of
dart
testing.
analogy, that kid's taking a test?
Right. But we have
And that's
multiple assessments of our own kids. We have report
Absolutely.
cards, we have tests before
multiple
they take
assessments that
their
we do.
unit and
tests,
after their
grades.
units, and all that day-to-day measurement and day-to-day learning isn't reflected in one exam, a snapshot. Is that kind of what you're saying?
Right, and if the outliers are the 200 kids coming in and out every year, 150 or 200 kids, I
Yeah,
think
yeah.
we achieve, or they achieve, growth with everything that is in place, and additionally the tutors and
And a kid enters our system, they're gateway students. I mean, they're part of our system. They're no different than any other child. I mean, it's just, we go after them academically like we do every other child.
So
I think you had a great point about the growth, and if you take a look at the growth in the high school.
Hear what you have to say, please? Could you speak into the microphone so that people at home can hear what you have to say, please? Thank you.
Just some food for thought. You talked about growth. If you go back to the Gateway High School and look at the growth, we did well on ELA, but if you look at math, you're gonna find out that our growth is below the statewide average in math. Now, I'll just point out to you that I think the math lab is gone. I'm not sure about the extra classes in math. Certainly you haven't had those in the time of COVID. I don't know whether you have them back, but the data is trying to tell you something. The data is trying to tell you something.
I think the best thing we can do to work on our achievement of all of our students is to keep them in the building, keep them in the classroom.
Well,
Because
we are
we all
working
know-
on that, Mrs.
Yep.
Cerrucci.
And I commend the Gateway School District for being here face to face in person all year with our students.
That is a good
because
point. That is a good point.
Sadly,
There-
with 2 to 3 years of learning loss, we're all behind the 8 ball, all of our kids.
Yes, ma'am. Are we ready for our super?
So I have
Oh,
question.
Dr. Singh, I'm sorry,
question.
yes.
One point. I think there is a bit of overemphasis on kids who are moving in and transiently or otherwise. A change of 100, 150 students in a student total number 3,000, if you calculate it statistically, it doesn't skew it so much. You are looking at a 5% population, which is coming into new. And 5% brings out difference only so much into a total 100%. So I think there is in our discussion, we are paying little too much emphasis on the students moving in. It's an overall body. So net contribution is small. Yeah, I think yeah, we should keep that. And same thing, I was kind of struck with your presentation before. I first of all, I was not aware what is EL3, and it's our school area we are in, I guess. And so we compare those. I think we have to go beyond and look at the other schools other than our immediate neighbors and how we compare with those. And I don't know how you calculated the state total data that we are 7th. And I didn't see the schools I know and people I know their kids are going. So I think we have to get out of this EL3 schools and their parameters of how they are doing.
I think he means that the AIU.
The region we were in.
That's a region that the state puts us in by
So
county.
our area, whatever it was.
Yeah.
So I think in our comparison, we know that we are better than that. And we should compare with something with better schools even in our county.
You mean like even Westmoreland County, like?
No, I'm talking about Allegheny County.
Yeah, we can.
So,
we can-
you
we
have
can
Mount
match up with
you
any
have
school.
Mount Lebanon, you have North Allegheny, and so forth, Upper St. Clair. So all those are there. So we should, I would aim, if I'm to aim, if Pitt is going to aim to remain best in Pennsylvania, I think they should talk about how good they are compared to Ivy League schools. So in that spirit and manner, I think we should compare ourselves with other established or more proficient schools.
Thank you, Dr. Singh.
I have a sense that my entire spectacular speech has been wasted. We can compare to anything you'd like, but when we're done comparing, we all agree with the same thing. We want to see the gap shrink and or disappear, and we want to identify the steps, the tools, whatever there is available to get us there. So we can meet here every 2 weeks, every month, and hash out again how, one group thinks this number makes the achievement gap look a little worse, a little better, or we can actually put our heads together, avail ourselves of everything that there is and try, to reduce it. Let's all say out loud, we don't like the achievement gap. We want it smaller. Let's do it.
We don't like the achievement gap. We want to make it
Thank you.
smaller. Let's do it.
I mean, seriously,
I'm
we
right
just,
there
we
with
keep
you.
circling
Let's do
back
it.
to the same thing. I'm with you. It's
We keep talking, but we're not walking.
all right. So we're going to have a meeting.
We are walking. Like I think our administrators find offense to that because it
No.
signifies that they're not doing anything.
No, it does not at all. They're great at what they do. I sat on their board as a community member, and I applaud them every day. But let's be real, in any entity, we want more hours in a day and more days in the week. We don't have enough foot soldiers on the ground to help us to accomplish the goal. And if there's any way that we can give them the resources to be even greater, Let's do that.
Yes, yes, ma'am.
Period.
Everybody who
They're
agrees with
good.
that, please raise your hand.
They're good at
Everybody,
what they
who's
do.
got a problem with that
Nobody
idea?
has a problem with that. Exactly. We
So,
all agree.
Going forward, we need to identify who and what are those foot soldiers? Where are those resources best allocated? And, okay, we've got now a 2030 data for what you just described. When do we want to have an answer for that? And how are we going to get it?
Well, we need it yesterday, but we need to work on getting it tomorrow.
Okay,
We
so,
need somebody dedicated to doing that, which we don't have someone who is solely dedicated to doing that. Sure, we have.
Superintendent who's solely dedicated to educating our kids.
all right, and along those lines, we've got something to discuss a little bit later. Can we get to the superintendent's report, or do we have anyone else who wanted to speak? No, yes, superintendent's report.
I've done a lot of talking tonight, but we do have a policy committee meeting Thursday.
And building and grounds.
And building and grounds, 6 and then 6:30.
Where will it be held?
That will be held here in the LGI.
Will it be broadcast live on the local cable access stations so people can tune in and find out what the buildings and grounds?
No,
updates?
it will be taped and then it will be placed on the website for viewing purposes.
Very
So
good.
everyone can be informed.
Excellent.
Thank you. Do we have any board committee reports? Anyone want to offer up anything?
Sure.
Where we started? Want to go around the horn or you're just going to start, John?
I'll just say that the new Monroeville and Pitcairn municipal councils and school directors were recently seated. So my question to this team here is, shall we soon schedule an intergovernmental meeting with them? I think we should. So
And
I
Dr. Short pointed out that might
I
be a
mentioned
good
that,
time to do the land bank as part of that.
Exactly. Okay, so I will put that on my agenda to build a time when most of us can do all that. Okay, next, Val, do we have any update regarding the Sunrise School's troubled roof?
It's in litigation.
Thank you. Next, the new school board director's orientation to the school district's personnel and operations is currently being offered by the Gateway administration and staff. Next, the new school board director required training is currently being offered by the PSBA and the Allegheny Intermediate Unit 3. Next, Gateway School Board leaders are invited to attend the monthly PSBA board leaders meeting. That's a Zoom meeting. All school board members are invited to attend the PSBA's All School Directors Monthly Exchange Meeting. That's virtual. So in other words, there's a lot of means out there for us to be better as board members, talk with each other across the Allegheny Intermediate Unit, across the state, find out what other people are thinking, doing, succeeding, failing at. So let's take advantage of all of these offerings to help us do better at school board meetings. The last one that I have, the school students recently performed the glass menagerie. Boy, oh boy, was that terrific. Kudos to Mr. Larry Survey, who's getting ready to retire and wind down after many, many years to the Gateway School District and serving the theater department there, and to Jim Holtz as well for what he's done with the kids. Lastly, Advanced Placement Honors class had their classical literature presentations held over the past few days by the senior students. Those students extracted some lessons offered by classical literature taught by Phil Randolph, and the students compared those to the life lessons that they actually learned. I attended one of those. Boy, oh boy. It helps the students understand reading great literature enriches a person greatly. That's my report.
Thank you, sir. Who's next? Anybody? No. All right, then. What I would like is a motion to adjourn to executive session and not to return to the meeting.
Motion to move into executive session to discuss personnel
Yes, of
and
course.
potential litigation. Second.
Motion has been made and seconded. Any questions? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. Good night, everyone. Appreciate it. We